The first thing you feel is the pull on your wrists. The second is the smoke. The third is the certainty that your life no longer belongs to you. You are 17, still wearing the clothes you slept in, and as they drag you across the wet sand toward the shore, you know your village is gone. Not conquered, not defeated, erased. The men who captured you don't speak your language. Their voices sound like growls, their laughter like animals celebrating an easy kill. You don't understand their words, Pike, but you understand this: they don't see you as a person. The ship waiting on the beach looks alive, long, narrow, its wooden ribs stained with salt and old blood. A dragon's head carved on the prow watches you with hollow eyes. You don't wait for the shove. Your legs are too weak to resist. You fall to your knees. A tear slips down your cheek. They laugh. To your left, a woman tries to run. A Viking strikes her with the flat of his axe and she collapses. To your right, a child screams for his mother. No one answers. Everything happens fast. Too fast to think. Too fast to pray. All you can grasp is this: you are loot, a commodity, someone's future profit. And as the ship pushes away from the shore, as your home becomes nothing more than a fading shape on the horizon, you learn a truth no one ever taught you. Vikings didn't come for gold, they came for people. If stories like this matter to you, hit the like button and subscribe. Now, we continue. Before the ship even touches deep water, you've already been absorbed into a machine, a system that existed long before you were born and would continue long after you died. Because for the Vikings, slavery wasn't a byproduct of war. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a tragedy. It was the business model. Every raid, every burning village, every woman ripped from her home followed a logic as cold as iron. Captives were worth more than gold. The men who took you weren't acting out of rage or instinct. They were investors. A chieftain gathered partners, landowners, warriors, merchants, and together they financed an expedition. Timber for the hull, iron for the rivets, wool for the sail, pitch for waterproofing, food for weeks at sea. A single ship represented more wealth than your entire community could produce in years. The timber alone required the felling of dozens of mature oak trees. The iron rivets, hundreds of them, had to be forged by skilled blacksmiths over weeks of labour. The woolen sail cost as much as a small farm, and the crew, 30 to 60 men who expected payment, food, and a share of the profits. The investment was staggering, and because they invested so much, the return had to be guaranteed. Human beings were the safest investment. Gold runs out, silver can be stolen, livestock dies. But a person could be sold today, worked tomorrow, bred into more labour a year later, and disposed of whenever necessary. A person cannot rebel in court, cannot testify, cannot refuse. A healthy young woman could sell for the equivalent of 8 to 12 cows, more wealth than most families would see in 5 years. A single ship carrying 20 captives represented a fortune that could fund the next raid, buy land, secure alliances, and elevate a chieftain's status for a generation. The math was simple. The profit was guaranteed. To them, you were the perfect asset. The ships themselves were designed for human hunting. The shallow draft allowed them to skim rivers no one thought navigable. A community 100 miles inland could wake up to Vikings on their doorstep. There was nowhere to flee. The Irish chronicles describe it with chilling simplicity. They came from the sea like wolves. What they could not take they burned. But what they wanted most, what they calculated first, was not silver, not weapons, not treasure. It was women. Young women brought the highest prices. Young women lasted the longest under forced labour. Young women produced the next generation of slaves. Every captured girl was a walking investment portfolio. Some were kept for work, some for concubinage, some for breeding. Others were sold repeatedly across hundreds of miles, from Ireland to Scandinavia, from Scandinavia to Kiev, from Kiev to Constantinople. Your life, your future, your body, all of it fit neatly into their economy. For them, you weren't a tragedy. You were a return on investment. Not everyone taken in a raid shared the same fate. The Vikings knew precisely who they wanted and who they didn't. As the ship joins others returning from different coasts, you begin to notice the glances. Quick, practiced, transactional. None of them are random. They are evaluating you the way a trader evaluates livestock. Quietly, efficiently, without a shred of humanity. During a raid, the first targets were always the same. Isolated farms, undefended villages, monasteries where the terrified fled for protection. But inside those places, the true prize was never the gold or the cattle. It was women of the right age. Monastic chronicles record it bluntly. They took the young, those who could walk, those who could obey. The elderly were useless. Mothers with newborns slowed the march. The injured offered no profit. Many were killed on the spot to save time. But you were separated. You remember the exact moment. A rough hand gripping your arm. Your mother screaming your name. The ground spinning as 3 warriors pulled you away. The sickening realization that you could not follow her voice anymore. What happened to you was not hatred. It was accounting. Your age meant labor. Your body meant endurance. Your future meant children born into bondage. Your presence meant guaranteed silver in any market from Dublin to Hedeby. Some women were marked for domestic servitude in Scandinavia. Some were destined for Norse settlements in Ireland or Iceland. Others would be forced far east, where traders along the Volga paid high prices for captives from the British Isles. But all of them, all of you, shared the same beginning. Forced separation, forced silence, forced erasure. The world narrowed to commands you could not understand and paths you could not fight. You see a boy clutching his sister's dress as a warrior tears them apart. You hear 2 girls begging to stay together before a man kicks one toward a different ship. You watch a mother drop to her knees, reaching for her daughter's hand, until a Viking drags her away like discarded fabric. The brutality wasn't loud, it wasn't chaotic, it was methodical. And in that cold efficiency, you finally understood something far worse than fear. They had not just captured you. They had dismantled everything that made you belong to a world. They weren't taking people. They were sorting merchandise. The journey begins long before the ship reaches the open sea. It begins with the creaking of timber under the weight of armed men, the tightening of wet ropes around your wrists, the first muffled sobs of the women sitting beside you. All of you lined up, silent, shaking, waiting for a future none of you can see. You are forced to sit on the floorboards between the rowers. There is no space to straighten your legs, no space to lie down, barely enough to breathe. Your clothes are soaked by waves that crash over the sides. Salt burns the cuts on your skin. Your teeth chatter uncontrollably as the cold wind slices through your thin dress. A woman beside you gets seasick and vomits. A Viking pushes her away with his boot, not out of cruelty, but out of habit, the way someone moves a sack that's in the wrong place. Hour after hour, the ship moves forward. Every stroke of the oars sends a vibration through the wood, into your body, into your bones. Your world shrinks to the rhythm of iron against water, wood against muscle, breath against fear. Food is scarce. Most of it goes to the rowers. To you they toss scraps, a handful of damp oats, a crust of hard bread. You learn to eat fast because hesitation means hunger. At night, the cold becomes unbearable. The wind cuts through your soaked clothes like knives made of ice. You try to huddle with the other women for warmth, but the chains make it impossible to get close enough. Your fingers go numb. Your lips crack and bleed. The wooden planks beneath you are slick with seawater, and something darker you try not to think about. When a storm hits, the terror becomes absolute. The ship pitches violently. Water pours over the sides in sheets. The rowers tie themselves to the benches. You and the other captives are left to grab whatever you can. Wet rope, splintered wood, each other's arms. A girl near you loses her grip and slides toward the edge. A warrior catches her by the ankle, not to save her, but to protect his investment. He drags her back and ties her wrist to a rowing bench so tight the rope cuts into her skin. The sound of the ship is constant, wood groaning under impossible strain, water slapping the hull, the rhythmic grunt of men pulling oars, the wind screaming through the rigging. It burrows into your skull until you can't remember what silence sounds like. Some women faint, some whisper prayers, some don't wake up. When a woman dies, they don't stop the ship. A Viking lifts her by the shoulders, drags her to the side and lets the sea take her. No words, no pause. Her life ends in seconds, forgotten in the next wave. But the worst moments are when the oars stop. Not for rest, not for mercy, but for inspection. Torches move across the women's faces. Warriors check your arms, your teeth, your posture, evaluating which of you might survive long enough to be sold. The weak are noted, the feverish are ignored. One woman is pulled aside, she doesn't return. You learn quickly that on this ship, invisibility is survival. Crying makes you noticeable, strength makes you valuable, fear makes you tempting. You hold yourself still, barely breathing, wishing you could sink into the wood beneath you, because in the belly of a Viking longship, surrounded by men who see you as cargo, not a single thought is more terrifying than this one. Being noticed might be worse than being forgotten. When the ship finally approaches land, you expect relief, but the moment you see what waits for you on the shore, relief dies faster than hope. It is not a village, not a settlement, not a sanctuary. It is a market, a place built on noise, bargaining, metal, sweat, and human misery. Men shout across the docks, traders argue over prices. The smell of fish mixes with smoke, tar, and fear. Your feet touch the pier and nearly give out beneath you. Not because you're weak, but because the reality hits you all at once. You are not taken for revenge, you are taken for sale. You and the others are herded into a line. The ropes around your wrists are cut, but only to be replaced with chains. Cold iron clamps around your ankles. The weight is crushing, humiliating. It tells you more clearly than words ever could. You are inventory. A crowd begins to gather. Men walk past, inspecting each of you with the same detached interest they would give to livestock. They check your teeth, your posture, your arms, your age. They speak openly about your body as if you cannot hear them, as if you are deaf or dumb, or simply not worth acknowledging. One woman tries to cover her chest when a trader rips her clothing to show her better. He slaps her so hard she falls to her knees, not for resisting, but for slowing the transaction. Prices vary. Young women sell fast. Strong women are worth more. Pregnant women are discounted. Sick women are discarded. Some buyers are Norse settlers bringing home new labour. Others are traders moving stock to different ports. Dublin, Hedeby, Birka, Kaupang. For some women, this dock is only the first stop in a long chain of markets, stretching from the British Isles all the way to the Caliphate. You realise you will not see the women beside you again. Not the one who prayed, not the one who trembled, not the one who held your hand in the night. A man steps forward, points at you, says something you don't understand. The trader smiles. Your chain is pulled, your world shifts, and in the space between two breaths, your fate changes forever. You are sold. The house they take you to is nothing like the home you once knew. It is long, dark, and built from thick timber. The ceiling hangs low, heavy with smoke from a fire that never stops burning. Not for warmth, but for work. The first thing you learn is that slaves do not have a place, not a bed, not a seat, not a corner to call their own. You sleep near the fire, on a rough blanket that feels more like woven thorns than wool. Your clothes never fully dry, your bones never fully warm. Your new master's wife watches you with the cold attention one might give a tool, not out of cruelty, but out of certainty. You exist to lighten her burden. Your day begins long before the sun rises. By the time the sky turns grey, your hands are already raw from grinding grain. The stone is heavy. The work is endless. Your shoulders ache until they numb themselves. The grinding stone wears, grooves into your palms. Blood mixes with flour until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. You grind until your wrists swell, until your back locks into a permanent curve, until the sound of stone against stone echoes in your dreams. Then comes the water, bucket after bucket dragged from an icy stream that bites at your skin. The path is steep. Your feet slip on wet stones. The buckets are never light enough, never few enough. You carry firewood, logs so heavy your knees buckle. You clean ashes with hands that crack and bleed from the lye. You wash clothes in water so cold your fingers go numb within minutes. You scrape hides that reek of rot and death. You mend torn garments by firelight until your eyes blur. You brew ale in huge vats, stirring for hours until your arms feel like lead. You cook meals you will barely taste, because slaves eat last, and only what remains. The food you're given is always cold, scraps of fat and gristle the free family wouldn't touch. Bread so hard you have to soak it in water just to chew. Porridge that's been sitting for days, sour and congealed. You eat it anyway, because hunger is worse than disgust. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not look up unless ordered to. You do not pause, not even when your fingers bleed. The free women of the household, the wife, her daughters, her sisters, see you as both beneath them and dangerously close. You are a reminder that the world they control is fragile, and that you, by existing, could fracture it. Their eyes track you everywhere, not with empathy, but with possession. At night, when the house finally quiets, you hear them sleeping in the raised beds. The beds you will never touch. Their laughter fades into the rafters, into spaces you're not allowed to enter. You curl beside the fire, your body stiff, your throat dry. There is no door keeping you inside, no bars trapping you in this place. You could walk out into the night, but you wouldn't make it 2 miles. Because in this world, a slave isn't chained by iron. A slave is chained by the knowledge that she no longer belongs to herself. There are nights when the house grows too quiet, a silence so deep it feels staged. It's the kind of silence that tells every slave girl in the room to lower her eyes, still her breath, and pray that no one calls her name. Because in many Norse households, a woman like you wasn't only labour, you were access, availability, property. There were no laws to protect you, no testimony you could offer, no authority who would listen. A slave's body was part of her master's wealth, and wealth could be used however its owner wished. The free wife knew this, she always knew, but knowledge didn't make it easier or safer. To her, you were not a victim, you were a threat, a crack in the foundation of her status, a reminder that her husband's desires didn't stop at the walls of her marriage bed. And when a slave girl became pregnant, when you became pregnant, the air inside the house changed. Your stomach wasn't just carrying life, it was carrying tension, power, shame, possibility. Your child was of your master's blood, but not of his world. Some men acknowledged such children, granting them freedom, raising them near the hearth, allowing them the smallest slice of legitimacy. Others denied them entirely, declaring them slaves at birth, condemning their own sons and daughters to a life of labour, pain and silence. The free wife often watched you with a bitterness sharper than cold steel. Your existence complicated hers. Your child threatened her children's place. Your body was a reminder that she could not control everything inside her own home. The other slave women avoided looking at you, not because they judged you, but because they feared the consequences that would fall on them if your workload decreased. In this world, motherhood was not a blessing. It was a gamble, one whose stakes you never chose, whose rules you never learned, and whose outcome you never controlled. You learned quickly that even in birth, even in giving life, you owned nothing. Not your body, not your future, not even your child. Everything, absolutely everything, belonged to someone else. There are nights when even the fire seems afraid to crackle, nights when the quiet inside the longhouse feels wrong, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. It is on nights like these that you understand a truth you were never meant to learn. Not all slave women die of age. Some die of use, some die of ritual, some die of irrelevance. The first extreme fate is punishment, a broken pot, a missed task, a moment too slow to obey. The reason doesn't matter. A slave's pain costs nothing. Archaeologists have found the evidence in bones, healed fractures from beatings, spines damaged from endless labour, teeth worn down to the roots, from grinding grain hour after hour. Violence wasn't always loud, but it was constant. The second fate is far worse: sacrifice. When a powerful Norseman died, his family did not bury him alone. He was to be honoured with wealth, animals, and sometimes people. Travellers from distant lands wrote about it. Archaeologists confirmed it. And the truth is cold and simple. A slave girl could be chosen to follow her master into the next world. Chosen. A word that sounds gentle, but meant forced. She would be washed, dressed, perfumed, given alcohol until her mind blurred, dragged from bed to bed under the guise of ritual, while men whispered to her, "Tell your master, I did this out of love." 10 days of preparation, 10 days of dread. On the first day, they took her from her work and dressed her in fine clothes she had never been allowed to touch. On the second, they fed her meat and mead, luxuries she had only watched others consume. By the third day, she understood she was being fattened for slaughter. Each day, the ritual grew darker. More alcohol, more hands, more voices telling her she was honoured, blessed, chosen by the gods. Meanwhile, her master's body was prepared in a nearby tent, washed, dressed in armour, surrounded by weapons and treasures he would need in the afterlife, and she was told over and over that she would serve him there as she had served him here. On the 10th day they led her to the burial site, or to the funeral ship, if he was wealthy enough to be burned at sea. The dead man was laid out with weapons and treasures. The girl was placed beside him. 2 men pulled a rope around her neck. The old woman, the ritual executioner, drove a blade between her ribs again and again to speed her journey. The drums, the shield beating, the chanting, all of it existed for one reason: to drown out the girl's screams, so the other slave women wouldn't try to run when their master died someday. The third fate was slower, quieter, being sold again and again, from one home to another, from one market to the next, until your body could no longer keep up. Scandinavia, Ireland, Iceland, Kiev, Constantinople, the routes changed, the hands changed, the chains did not. For many women, the end didn't come in a blaze of ritual or the agony of punishment. It came the way a candle dies, softly, without ceremony, without witnesses, without a name. And in that silence, you finally understand the darkest truth of all. In the Viking world, the greatest cruelty wasn't what they did to you. It was that they didn't think of you at all. History often remembers the Viking Age as an era of bold explorers, fierce warriors, and heroic sagas carved into stone. But a civilization is never defined only by the men who held the swords. It is also defined by the people who couldn't lift one. And when you look closely, past the legends, past the poetry, past the romantic myths, you see the other half of the Viking world. The women who never returned home. The girls dragged from burning villages, marched to ships they had never seen, sold in markets they couldn't imagine, worked to the bone in houses where they were never allowed to belong. Their lives were not footnotes, they were the foundation. Their hands wove the sails that carried Viking ships across oceans. Their labour built the farms and households that sustained Norse settlements. Their bodies shaped the genetic landscape of entire nations. Their silence filled the spaces where history refused to speak. And yet, their names are lost. No sagas were written for them. No runestones were carved in their memory. Their stories survive only in the bones archaeologists unearth. in the chronicles written by terrified monks, in the legal codes that reduced them to property, and in the DNA of modern populations who never knew where their ancestry began. When you understand that, the Viking world stops looking heroic and starts looking brutally human. Because the truth is simple and devastating. Viking expansion wasn't built on glory. It was built on people. People stolen, people broken, people forgotten. And among them, countless women who never had the chance to grow old, to grow free, or to be remembered. But remembering them now, saying their story out loud, is a small act of justice, a small act of defiance against the silence they were forced to live and die in. If this story opened your eyes, if it made you feel something, consider subscribing. Here, we tell the side of history no one else wants to look at, and there are many more truths waiting in the dark.